Well, hello, beautiful souls. This is Masami. This is the part 2 of the new moon in Virgo, where I introduced the 3 main points in the part 1 of the video. And let's remember that the September's theme is about honoring the right timing. The third point that I introduced in the part 1 video at the end was choosing important but not urgent path. And this came to me quite intuitively, and this is when I was contemplating about the theme of honoring the right timing for the September's theme. This comes from Stephen Covey's 4 quadrants, and it's the time management matrix that he introduced. So in his book, First Things First, Stephen Covey developed a tool called the time management matrix for analyzing how we spend our time. And he asked a very good question and very important question here. He says, what does it matter how much we do if what we are doing isn't what matters most? And I'm going to read that question again. What does it matter how much we do if what we are doing isn't what matters most? So Stephen Covey explains that most people are driven by the concept of urgency. Like, oh my gosh, I got to get it done. I got to get it done. There's this time limit to this, and creates kind of the crisis mode. And there's a definite stress behind that kind of urgency. But to really effect positive change in our lives and shift our lives and get unstuck, we need to recognize the way we spend our time and use our time based on the concept of importance, not urgency. So not getting too caught up in like, I got to get this done. There's a deadline coming, and the sense of like a fight or flight almost kicking in. Instead of getting sucked into that, Stephen Covey says that we need to go more towards, is this important? And to make this a little bit easier for all of us to understand, and for some of you, this might be a review from maybe your college years or your master's program, because I use this kind of a concepts in my master's program as well. So it's kind of a review for me, but we've created a PDF that you can download below. And so it's just a one sheet. You can print it out and follow through, or maybe put it on maybe a refrigerator or somewhere and do a little contemplation around this 4 quadrants and figure out where you're most likely spending most of your time at. So especially this month and its theme of honoring the right timing, I'm seeing that the time is the most valuable commodity, and we really would benefit from sitting down and thinking about and contemplating and understanding where you are allocating your amazing and beautiful and important commodity 24 hours. And once it's, the time is gone and it's done, the moment will never come back. And in fact, this year, we're already in September, and this past 8 months or so are never going to come back. This gift will never come back for us. So it's worth it for us to print this PDF, look at it and say, wow, maybe I am spending it in the right way, or maybe this is beneficial to me, but maybe I could tweak it a little bit. Or you might notice that, wow, I'm spending a lot of time on more of a kind of a fight or flight urgency and not spending my precious time and this gift towards something that is very important for my own personal growth, but for having your heart to expand. So I would just quickly go over them. I would love for you to have that printout, maybe pause the video, come back to the video, and have that printout and look through it as well. But I would just briefly go through them for you. So quadrant 1, which will be on, if you're looking at that sheet, it'll be in the upper left corner. It's called Quadrant of Necessity. So when we are in, this is important, but it's also urgent, that's when you're doing things that are like time sensitive. You got to get it done. There's this like email that you have to answer right now, or this is going to become a major problem, something like that. So the quadrant 1 is when we ignore that, it can become problematic and you can get into trouble with it. So maybe there's some deadline with it, so you're driven to get things done. There's a pressing problems that you have to solve. So there's a little bit of crisis mode that comes with it. And what happens is that we end up feeling pretty stressed out and burnt out because you're managing crisis at this point and always feeling like you're putting out fires. And a lot of the clients that I work with, and I'm going to speak from more of a physiological standpoint. I do get clients emailing me with this kind of an urgency kind of emails. Oh my gosh, I just went to the doctor and I'm supposed to have a heart surgery. I mean, in fact, that kind of email actually came to me recently as well. Or I'm having this crisis, like I woke up this morning and I am completely sick and I have high fever and I don't know exactly what to do, that kind of a crisis mode, right? So you do need to attend to them, but you can see that can be really tough on your nervous system. And quadrant number 2 is the upper right corner. And that is the quadrant that it's really important that we can allocate or we can maybe direct ourselves a little bit more towards. We all have to move through these 4 quadrants, but the second quadrant is quite beneficial to all of us. And I encourage you to see if you can allocate more of your precious commodity, your time, towards the upper right corner. And it's the quadrant of quality. It's considered to be you're in the zone or in the flow. So this is when things are important, but not necessarily like a crisis mode urgency. So you get to really explore what it is that your heart thinks it's important, feels important, and what you really want to explore. And you have the time to do it. So, but what happens is it's easier to put on these things on the back burner. And you might start to say, well, when I have time, or, when I retire, or on the weekends, I'll get to it, or, maybe next vacation, maybe I'll do it. That's kind of what happens to the quadrant 2 a lot. And in order to focus on these activities on the quadrant 2, we have to really proactively allocate the time. So you have to become quite conscious of where your time is going and honoring the right timing. Proactively honoring the time can take you to the quadrant number 2, which, like I said, it's the zone that we want to get to as often as we can. It's the place that you're preparing for your own personal growth. It's also preparing for your maybe future. Perhaps like, savings account can be this proactively saving for your future. But I would say preparing and being preventive of your own future health. So you're not in the crisis mode and saying, oh my gosh, I am falling apart, because I've been to the quadrant number 1 many times and stuck there for many years. So I couldn't even practice the preventive healthcare. But that's the place that you may want to allocate and honor your time towards, is that you're taking supplements, you're eating clean foods, and in which I talked about in the energy update for September, is to eat things, to look at things, to explore things that are frequency wise can be beautiful and elevating to who you are. And I think this is where I think of planning and preparing, as in, if you think of like if you're writing a book, this is where you're taking the time to outline the book. This is when you're taking the time to work on your book proposal. So you may not be actually writing your book yet. You're not writing your chapters yet, but you're taking the time to really spend your important time on getting clear on what it is that you're writing about. So it seems like, am I wasting my time? But no, the payoffs, later on will be a huge benefit to all of us. And this is when you can get clearer on your values, which I've been talking about in August in energy update that I did. I talked about becoming clear on your own values, knowing what you value becomes so important. So that's the time you want to spend on. That's where you want to allocate your energy to. So that's the quadrant 2. And I would think this is the time when you get to build true friendships, true relationships, and relationships that will elevate one another together. So you're not getting energy sucked from that person, or they become your vampires, or you become their vampires, but it's a really mutually beneficial. That's the kind of activities that you want to focus on. And I would say the quadrant number 2, I'm spending a little extra time on this quadrant too, because it's the zone that's the most important zone to be in. It's the time that you spend some time on self-inquiry, self-discovery, which many of you are doing this with us. And those of you that did the Venus retrograde program, we did that. So maybe revisit some of that. The more time we spend in quadrant 2, the more quality we add to our lives. And I've seen this in my clients' lives, but I've seen this in my own life as well. So this month's theme being honoring the right timing, it's necessary that you spend a little bit of extra time contemplating in the zone of the quadrant 2. And I want to quote Stephen Covey's quote here again, another one. He says, the key is not to prioritize your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. I'm going to say that again. The key is not to prioritize your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. So then let's move to quadrant 3, which is the lower left corner. It's known as the quadrant of deception or illusion. And I've talked about this a lot with the super full blue moon that we had. And if you haven't seen that video, I highly recommend you watch that again or watch it for the first time. A lot of us, watch video once and then you say, okay, well, I'm moving on. But the time is not linear. And it's this new moon really brings out like consolidation or reviewing of what we learned in the month of August, especially around the new moon, the micro new moon that we had in August, but also the blue full super moon that we had. And I talked about cutting through the fog of illusion and deception. And this quadrant number 3 is about something that is not important, but feels urgent. So the noise of urgency creates the illusion of importance. So I want you to kind of think about that. Quadrant 3 is kind of like that. So like notifications that pop up on your screens or a phone. And I realized recently that I had it open on my screen, that the chats or the texts that come in through my phone, it'll just pop up on the right-hand corner. And I thought, oh, when did that start? Sometimes restarting the computer will restart those little pop-ups. So I have to go back and delete those things and remove it out of my computer, because makes you feel like there's kind of an urgency when it's not, and totally takes you out of your zone, the flow, and, just makes you kind of get disconnected from what you were doing. So interruptions can be a really tough thing to come back from. And I'm not going to go into the studies here, but briefly is that when you're in the flow and interruptions come in, takes a long time to come out of the interruptions and get you back into the flow again. So it's important that you create maybe even a screen time or your life that doesn't have these interruptions popping up all over the place. So I'm trying to do a better job with my own life as well. And, other things are like meetings and regular meetings or regular Zoom calls and things like that. Maybe you have a membership of, it may not be that important that you join live because it's recorded so you can come back and watch it again, right? So maybe choose ways that you can not create this like illusion of importance, and see if you could set aside time to come back and watch some recordings as well. And if you stay stuck in a quadrant 3, you will experiencing like the same similar things as a quadrant 1, where you're having to manage crisis again and start to see goals and plans and contemplation of creating even like a book proposal that I talked about as worthless, like, oh, it's meaningless. Why should I even spend time on that? So you start kind of thinking like that. Preventive medicine and taking care of yourself today for the future feels like, well, what's the point in that? And you start to slack off on that. So, let's not slack off on that, because I work with people's health every day, all day, and it's worth it. It's worth it for you to pay attention to the preventive side of the health care. Okay. Healthcare is not a crisis management. because that's what we've been creating in the medical systems. And we are trying to get away from that. And when you spend too much time on a quadrant 3, you may start to feel victimized and out of control. And you start to feel like your energy is just getting sucked out. So not only you're become the vampire for other people, or you might feel like your energy is getting pulled out. So take a look at what's going on in your life here. And you may end up finding yourself kind of having shallow relationships because they're not willing to go deep with you. You don't have the time to go deep with them, and vice versa. So let's revisit the quadrant 2 if you can, if you're getting stuck in a quadrant 3. And the last one, quadrant 4, is called the escape or waste, like a wasting your time, wasting your precious commodity. So it's kind of an escapism, escape from reality by doing activities that do not address or resolve the problem or resolve what's here and what's real and what's important. I see this all the time in my clients, and I find myself doing it myself as well, just kind of like a busy work. You end up going to different places to do things. And while you really need to be working on perhaps figuring out your next step for finding a better place to live, or maybe getting a new job, that's more important for you. But then you just end up busying yourself, and then you find yourself, oh, another week has passed, kind of thing. Social media, big, big escape and the waste. It really sucks your energy. It's so easy to spend 3-4 hours just preparing or looking at it. Not preparing, but looking at social media, this endless scrolling through the screen. I mean, it's designed to endlessly scroll, right? So that's when we have to put some kind of a time limit, and we can do much better with that. I know I can do much better with that. Emails as well. I used to answer emails 7 days per week. And I finally, and my husband Chris said, you've got to have some kind of office hours. So I stopped answering emails on Saturdays and Sundays, and in the evening too, because, before I just felt like, oh, there's some crisis going on, I need to address that. But that is not honoring who I am either. So those are some of the things that could happen in quadrant 4. So like I said, take a look at the PDF that we have offered. It's just one page, print it out and see if you could do a little bit of a deeper personal search on this and revisit this really beautiful, knowledge that the Stephen Covey has given us years ago in the time management matrix that he gifted to us. Okay, so then the last thing I wanted to talk about on this part 2 video of the new moon in Virgo is what's going on in our bodies physiologically. What do we need to pay attention to? So I was tuning into myself and then into the collective, and what I felt the most was small intestinal health. And it's our digestion, but it's more of an absorption issues, because small intestine is where we absorb most of our nutrients from. So 99% of our nutrients, what comes in, they get sorted out, and through the villi, we absorb the nutrients from those walls. And so boundary issues can come up, but also maybe autoimmune issues with digestive issues, maybe irritable bowel syndrome, maybe pain in the gut, distension, and things like that, that will be happening at the lower gut level. So one of the things that you can do is to balance your macronutrients. So that will be protein, fats, and carbohydrates. And I actually started to feel like there's like a weird sugar cravings that started to kick in. So I had to ask myself if my macronutrients are balanced. And I realized that, oh yeah, you know what? I am actually slacking in good fats that are balanced in saturated fats, omega-3s, and omega-6s. So I am actually starting to pay attention, starting today, of my own body as well. And when it comes to small intestinal health, what you want to look at your body, I mean, there's so many things you can do, and the proteolytic enzymes are really important. Those trios that I talked about in part 2 of that September energy update video that I did, the link will be below there here. I talked about the trio of the using hydrochloric acid for digestion, using pancreatic enzymes, that's the proteolytic enzymes, that will clean out your gut. That's very important. And gallbladder and liver support. So those 3 supplements are going to continue to be very supportive of your small intestinal health. And the next thing that you want to do personally that you can do for yourself right away is to stroke from the pinky side of your arm out in an outer line. So maybe going like this and stroking to the back shoulder area, moving up the neck towards your ear. So stroking from the pinky up the shoulders, up the neck, and to the ear. And then see if you could massage your ears as well on both sides. That can be really good for your small intestinal health. And, if you're noticing kind of a sense of like you feel less joyful at times and you're feeling like, gosh, I wish I could just kind of laugh out loud. Sometimes there's a little bit of a stuck energy in that line that I just showed you. So do that. You can even do yoga poses and just kind of moving your arms and, winding them like this. That can be a very helpful position as well. So I hope some of these things will be helpful for you. And, really remember, I just want to remind you and remembering why I brought up the Stephen Covey's 4 quadrants. One is because of that super blue full moon's energy asking us to cut through the illusion and our own deceptions. I think that's still really playing into this month, and not to get so caught up in like, well, it's a new month, it's a new beginning. I don't need to review. I don't need to go back and learn from the last 8 months. I think that kind of thinking can get us into trouble. So that's why I think these 4 quadrants knowledge kind of came back into my psyche, into my intuitive lens. So this is why I wanted to share this with you. And in the, interest of honoring the right timing, I thought this was very, very important that I brought this up. So I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope to see many of you during the online empaths, really bringing the empaths more energy and flow and supporting the empaths online retreat that I'm a part of. And I hope you can join me on Monday when my interview will air. And on Saturday, I will be on live. So I hope you can join and maybe ask some questions for me directly. I look forward to being with you. Thank you for being you as a beautiful spirit, beautiful soul that is having this physical body experiences on this earth. Please continue to take care of yourself. Namaste.